Before we start today's roundtable, I want to give special thanks to Checkster, our group sponsor. Checkster has become well known in the recruiting industry by providing a platform that easily captures reference checks in the hiring process. I myself have been a customer of theirs for years. I use a reference checking tool for all of my new hires. However, Checkster has now released a new product suite called Insights. This new product suite is really what has excited me to have Checkster as the group sponsor. With Insights, the Checkster platform now covers employees from cradle to grave and not just reference checking, starting when they apply, going to offer, through onboarding, then covering their work at your company, and then to the end with exit interviews. It's an easy to use, easy to understand way of giving and getting feedback from your peers. Checkster's simple goal: to build more productive and passionate teams. Now, if this concept of getting insights from your peers regarding your work sounds familiar, it should, because that's the simple goal of this group: connecting, communicating, collaborating. Support me, support the group. Follow the link below, recruiting.org/Checkster. This will take you to a landing page to sign up for a quick demo. If you are just thinking about automating your reference checking process, it'll be well worth your time. But I encourage you to check out the full Insights suite. I'd love to find out if you feel the way I feel about it. Now let's get to today's roundtable. All right, let's jump right into it. Thank you everybody for attending episode 62 in Let's Talk Recruiting, where peer practitioners from across the country get together and talk about various topics that we all come across on our day-to-day activity as TA professionals. Jumping into it, our topic for today is attention-getting ways to recruit. There's sort of what we're going through now, the COVID phase, and it's almost like pre-COVID and post-COVID. So the COVID world is a different world that we're used to, but moving into 2021, it's going to be interesting to see the way TA comes through it and how we approach recruiting our talent, and just the messaging around everything that's going on, different workplace than we had before. So again, our title is Attention Getting Ways to Recruit. With us today, who's not quite here yet, is Brent Schreckenghost out of Atlanta. Hopefully he'll be able to pop in here pretty soon. We also have Glenn Marani out of New York City, Malia Jorgensen out of Seattle. Malia, did I get that right?
Yeah.
All right, okay, cool. And then Mahan, I always have trouble with yours. I'm going to give it a shot though. Mahan Kathartabi, did I get it?
Kath with him, but you got it.
Okay, great. Appreciate it. I was just telling Malia in the beginning, I grew up in the middle of Wisconsin where everybody was Pat and Jennifer and Rick and Susan. So I didn't get tested with my name pronunciation. So with Brent not being here just yet, Glenn, do you mind if we jump over to you and start with your items that you want to bring to the table?
Yep, not at all. Thanks, Sean. Welcome, everyone. So real quick background on myself. So I'm currently the Director of Talent Acquisition for an IT consulting company called Optima Global Solutions. We're actually based in New Jersey, been in business 19 years. Real quick background on myself. I started actually my career working for JP Morgan for 12 years on the IT side. The last 7 years I was an IT project manager, and I left, well, I got outsourced really, but I ended up switching careers at that point. And in the last 22 years, I've been in recruiting. And mostly working for small to mid-sized consulting companies, which are really, quote, called solution providers. What that really means is companies I've worked for have done project-based work for clients, whether it's an application development effort, maybe an assessment, wherever it may be. And we also do on-demand staffing, and we also do direct placement for clients. So I've been in all sides of the business. I do corporate recruiting for the consulting firms internally when I hire subject matter experts, salespeople, recruiters, what we call practice directors that lead our service offerings. So, you know, they're director level internal clients of mine and have always been. And all throughout these organizations, I've worked for companies up to 200 million. The toughest client usually is the CEO of the company, as far as when I'm trying to hire people for him and the company. So the issue with the companies I've worked for, and I'm pretty passionate about this, is we're not a brand name. All the companies I've worked for are not a brand name. We're not a Deloitte, we're not an Accenture, we're not an IBM or any known name out there. So to try and attract people to our organization is pretty unique. Well, I try to really think out of the box, and I have over the years. So a couple of things I wanted to mention today that I've done successfully over the years is, one is, well, for instance, as a consulting company, what you have to do is you have to associate yourself with either a service, an expertise. For instance, I'll use Xerox. You hear Xerox, you think of copiers, right? So the thing is, when you're a consulting company, you want people to know you as that expert in that field or area. So that's very important. Number one, name branding before I even go out to the public, right? So the other thing is, I always recommend that, and people in our organization too, including senior level managers in our organization, join networking and user groups. It could be by industry or skill set. And not only join them and attend meetings. Now it's obviously mostly Zoom and virtual, but the key is present at these meetings. Try and present, because then you can kind of exploit your brand name, your expertise, and then you get candidates attracted to the people in your organization. I don't want to downplay my role in the organization, but people in the companies I've worked for, they want to work for our subject matter experts. They want to work for those people. They want to learn and grow from those people. That's really important. So to me, it's really a team effort. I never looked at recruiting as an individual effort. It's all on me to make sure that person gets hired. It's definitely a team effort, especially with the practice directors in our organization and the C-level people in our organization. The other thing too is what I've done successfully over the past 12 years is I've joined what are called today, and there were several variations of this. Used to be outplacement firms. Now they're called career transition firms. So when big companies around my area, I'm from the Philadelphia area, companies like Merck, Bristol Myers Squibb, these big companies, when they lay off people, they usually pay for a service to get these people started with a career coach, get them on the right path to find a job. And they usually give either the person 3, 6, or 9 months with that service provider, depending on how senior they were in the organization. So what I've done with one of these organizations called Right Management is I have a really good relationship, and twice a year I do what I call career transition workshops. And these are people that have been working for organizations for a long time, and now they're hitting the job market, and a lot of them are pretty shocked, and pretty baffled on how they should go about finding a job. So I do that. And the thing I want to mention too, it's I get all levels of people that attend this, from like developers up to senior managers, and not all in the IT space. But I always look at people in that audience as not only potential candidates, but potential clients of our company, because you never know, depending on where they land. So that's something I've done. I've done it also a few times with another firm called Lee Hecht Harrison. I also have access to these two companies. They have a candidate like alumni database, and they actually give me access to their database of people, whether they're current or whether they were past people that use that service. So that's been pretty successful. The one thing I do want to mention that I'll back up a step too. I had at one of the user group sessions recently, before I left my last company, a little over 2 years ago, is I had one of our portfolio and project management practice directors actually present at a user group meeting, and he was presenting all about project management and et cetera. The thing is, it was key for me to have him there because that's the person in our organization that typifies the talent in our organization, and people will look up to him. So that's key. The other thing too is when I do these career transition workshops, I actually bring a senior level employee of our organization to that. And that really, instead of just having me as the recruiter, it's kind of a one-sided story. I have like an example of somebody that went through a career transition and used one of these career transition companies and got a job. And not only got a job, but got a job working as a full-time employee for a consulting company. So, using that person, and it's great when I have that person by my side because they can relate to that person probably a lot better than me as the recruiter. So that helps too. And the last thing I want to mention, as far as what I thought was pretty out of the box when I was at my last company, in trying to attract people, what I did was I held what I call an open house. It was by invitation only. And we had about 25, 30 seats in our office that we kind of set up in our large conference room. We kind of singled out people that we really wanted to attract to our organization, really thought it would be good for them to come in. And what we had them do is it was kind of a 3-step process. We had our CEO speak for 15, 20 minutes about the company, the vision, and the organization. Then we had our quote subject matter expert practice directors who led each of the areas of our discipline and service offerings. We had them introduce themselves just for a minute or two, and then we had like a 1 hour open networking session afterwards with like soft drinks and snacks, and give the people a chance to interact with not only the CEO but with the subject matter experts, and that it was really well received. I invited 30 people, only 2 did not show. And this was about like a 6 o'clock in the evening event, which means some people have to leave work a little early to get here to join this, but that's what they did. Now, again, this was all pre-COVID, the Zoom era and everything, but, we had planned to do some WebExes and follow up on that. But I think it's really important for people to meet the others in your organization. The more people they meet, they can start to see the culture, see the people in the organization, and that attracts senior level talent. And that's the type of talent that I have to attract often. So it's not easy. It's not a 10-minute phone call. Hey, you're interested in the job. It's a process. So, but that's what I wanted to mention.
Yeah. Glenn, let me ask you a question, because it kind of going back to the point of, hey, it's not a one-man show. Especially being in professional services, right? That brand of your company is very key. Is your marketing team partnering with you, supporting you? Do you get to use their stuff? Is there any type of deeper relationship with your marketing team, if you have one at a smaller size company even?
Yeah, so marketing's been a big issue in the companies I've worked for. It's very difficult. I mean, the problem is with a consulting firm, it's a relationship business. We actually, in our current organization, we actually have a marketing company, an outside marketing company helping us. But it's not getting a lot of traction. They do these things called email journeys. We get new potential clients and we send a series of 8 emails out to these people. Nobody really responds to email, not in the professional services space. So it's a warm introduction to a company is what we do. We've had sessions with our marketing team, with our sales people, our business development people, and our subject matter experts. And we target companies. And what we do is we had these sessions after work a couple of times a week at one point when we were doing a big sales strategy campaign. And we saying, okay, we're targeting Vanguard. Who knows somebody at Vanguard? That type of thing. So it's all relationship. It has nothing to do with, this salesperson has this account or this person has that account. It's if I'm a person, even if it's me and I have a relationship with somebody in a target client organization, I'm going to make that initial call to that client. So marketing's a tough thing. You could brand, you could put your name out there, but that's just for name branding. It doesn't really, it just gets your name out there, but our marketing departments don't lead to direct business most of the time. That's the way it works. Yeah, unfortunately.
One other question around the event piece of it and going out to these third-party organizations. Are you going, let's say you're going to an event and let's say you got one of your VPs who's going to go there and speak at a local event. Are you going to the event and then doing your best there? Or are you kind of telling the story of it? Hey, it's in 4 weeks, and you're kind of reaching out to your talented target ahead of time to kind of tell the story along the way, or is it just?
Oh, you mean like a networking event or something, or the internal event we had?
Well, anything in general. Like what I'm trying to get to is it just the event and then the outcome? Or are you kind of telling the story in a more repetitive way as you go to kind of help influence people? I keep looking at a lot of social media and stuff. They talk about consistency.
Yeah. So obviously consistency, it's a good thing you bring up, because the messaging is so important, right? And the common messaging, and that's been a big struggle in a lot of consulting companies. Like you could put a room of senior level people, 6 people in a room together, and you say, okay, what does our company do? You'll get 6 different answers, and that's not good, So the consistent messaging has to be there. But the thing is, what we typically do with these organizations is we kind of promote it with the who's facilitating that specific event. And, we kind of tell a story, but it's really through, their network, the people in their group. They're the ones that are pushing it out to the members. Like, for instance, we did an event at an Agile user group, right? So, I pushed all the information out to the person that was facilitating it and who was the chairman of the Agile group, the founder of the group, and he's the one that pushes it out to all the group members. So that's kind of how that's done
I
that
got
way.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. To the rest of the panelists, have any of you engaged in like this proactive work with third parties, external third party organizations like Glenn is doing?
No, I also work for a consulting firm. We have an internal marketing department, and I get about 25 to 50% of their time for employer branding and recruitment marketing.
That's a good amount of time.
Yeah, we have a lot of different projects that we work on together, but it's huge for a company that is not a name brand company and you want to build traction in the market.
Glenn, from an operations perspective, do you use a tool to kind of collect information as you meet people at these external events? Because you're not like literally sitting at your desk in a applicant tracking system or anything like that.
Yeah, so from a recruiting perspective, we use JobDiva, but from a potential sales perspective, we use Zoho. So, and then what we do, that's for more like leads. And then once we actually contact people, then they go into JobDiva too, from a CRM, from a sales perspective. Yeah.
Gotcha. Excellent.
But it's two separate people. It's prospective people and it's people that we've actually made contact with. We differentiate it that way.
Right. Does JobDiva have a mobile app to it?
Yeah, it does. I don't use it often though.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank
Just
you very much.
contact information, for the
Yeah.
most part.
Yeah, I've spent some days a few years back, a project at Apple, and they would do this event when they opened up a new retail store, and everything was via the iPad. So everything, all the tracking, everything like that, had to be an iOS app. So it's kind of an interesting challenge. Thank you, Glenn.
Sure.
Brent, how about we jump over to you?
Yeah, so quick intro, because I know it's a little bit late. So my name is Brent Schreckengoss, based in Atlanta, and I lead the recruitment division for technology across the U.S. and Canada within SAP. So I think what's interesting, what Glenn's saying, and Malia, and I'm sure the other folks on the call here, is that even though a lot of we're different industries, different products we're selling, so on and so forth, it's a lot of the same challenges, right? So I think there's a lot of things you can learn from one another. I think what's a little bit different for our organization, we're 100,000 plus employees, a big juggernaut ERP company. I think what we struggled with and have come a long way over the last couple of years is really becoming more personalized, personable as a company, personable in our approach from a marketing and branding perspective, and really reaching out to those folks that don't know much about SAP. If you go to Germany, it's a whole different ball game where it's a household name, but if you come and try and recruit out of Silicon Valley where there's hundreds of other startups and tech companies there, it's a dime a dozen. And I think a lot of folks and a lot of issues that we've seen over the past couple of years and trying to identify more is that we're not a consumer-based product company. So we don't develop iPads, we don't use Gmail, so on and so forth. So how can we connect with individuals on a one-on-one basis? And probably from our branding team and our marketing perspective over the past 2 years is really breaking down the big misconception where part of it, you're just an old school ERP company. We moved to more of a cloud transition company, but how can we make them more personal, the one-on-one interactions? So from a creativity standpoint, we've done a couple different things this year, especially with the COVID times, is I think everybody felt very siloed or alone, so to speak. So we wanted to make it a lot more personal in our touch, and what we've done over the last couple months, we've had Facebook Live and YouTube Live sessions with our recruiters, or just basic Ask Me Anything sessions, where we've had hundreds of different attendees from we call early talents or recent grads all the way up into architect level individuals, kind of talk a little bit about, ask questions on what's SAP working on, what are the different products going on, how are you improving the country for their COVID response, so on and so forth. And it's been great. I think the feedback's been great. It's been very personable, one-on-one. Maybe not that touch that you'd be able to get from just a basic career fair or basic job fair, fill in a blank, whether it's Grace Hopper or Tapia conference that you go and participate in. And a lot of other things that we've done, similar to what Glenn's talking about, is we've done more smaller VIP only meet and greets, whether it is virtual. So a couple of weeks ago in a different region, we had a wine tasting event. So we invited about 30 different target candidates we were looking to hire, and we sent them actual cases of wine ahead of time. And one of our clients is a big wine distributor, got on board. We had a kind of virtual wine tasting event where they talked about how SAP technology is used. Here's how they help behind the scenes, and talk about different opportunities that will come available there. So just being creative as far as that goes. And, at the end of the day, I always say this is that engineers want to hear from other engineers, accountants want to hear from other accountants, so on and so forth. So again, as Glenn kind of mentioned before, you need to have the buy-in from the business stakeholders, from the business standpoint. So these types of events, whether they're large events at a huge conference or one-on-one VIP only, invite-only events, it's important to have individuals from the business kind of own those talking points and make sure they're available there, not only to kind of sell their product, but I always tell folks to get them involved, you're selling your own brand as well. The tenure within the tech space is 2 to 3 years. So who knows, maybe you'll make connections and grow your career 2 or 3 years down the road if something else came up. So you kind of pitch it as a win-win there. I think it helps kind of get the brain moving a little bit and be a little bit more open to different ideas there.
Brent, you mentioned the differences between locations, right? Germany and Silicon Valley.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of get on the piece about engineers talking to engineers. Are you tailoring your outreach by the location, job role, and management level, or are we drilling down into who we're inviting or in what the content is?
Yeah, I think it's really just kind of hammering down. Each region is a little bit different. So in Europe, for instance, soccer or football, obviously as they call it, is big there. So we've had some events with our partnerships through Premier League and different tennis and soccer outlets there. But if you came over to the U.S., we have a partnership with some esports outlets as well to maybe target some of the younger up-and-coming folks that are maybe more into the esports side of things. So it's really, again, not a one-size-fits-all, but understanding your market region, understanding what are your strengths, weaknesses, and how we can build upon that.
And let me ask another question. This is kind of for the panel too. Given the world that Zoom has kind of evolved into with the pandemic and what have you, are Zoom meetings kind of along with what Brent is saying, and maybe even Glenn, if it's not face-to-face, what you're doing, are we evolving how we're going to communicate with groups of candidates? Are all our job fairs going to be Zoom events going forward, or what are your thoughts on incorporating these tailored Zoom events as it relates to recruiting?
It's funny. I think so. I have not attended a job fair in a very, very long time, to be honest with you. It just, because I think we target people and then, bring them in, that type of thing. And just to clarify a little bit. So when you're talking about, how do you get the messaging out? When we had these open house events, I specifically had phone conversations with candidates, and I kind of boosted their ego a bit, saying, hey, you've been selected to come into an open house event. We like your background. And these are not first-time candidates I'm speaking with. These are people that I've been trying to recruit, people in my pipeline for a while. So, but they feel, I guess they feel honored and, and excited to come in. And you're right. A lot of it's about networking too. Just if they can't, if you can't, you're just meeting another person in their profession, and it could go back to you. Real quick, I got hired at Optima by a person I worked with 20 years ago. So there you go, networking, right, and keeping contacts. So anyway.
Yeah, and I think real quick, as a piggyback, I think it'll be a combination of virtual and on-site events, so to speak, as well. I think what we've seen, especially folks that have daily lives, kids, activities, so on and so forth, whether you're married or single, it's hard to sometimes go to these events. So if we can make something virtual where they don't have to deal with traffic and the headache of going all over the place, that's great. But still provide that one-on-one touch for whether it's open house events or fill in the blank. I think it'll be more of a hybrid approach moving forward, personally.
And then do we still call them job fairs, or we call them industry events? I made the switch a while back where if it's a job fair, bring your resume and it's all about the company hosting it. But at an industry event, it's not just for your engagement with the host, but it really is to kind of associate with the other attendees in a way. Do we still call them, you call them job fairs? Are we shying away from that?
I think it depends on the promoter. I mean, I've saw one, before COVID, right before COVID, they said job fair. I think it all depends. It depends too on the level of people they're trying to attract to. I think there's a difference there.
Yeah, I think it's I would call it more of a career networking event, quite honestly, because some of these times it's going to take 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 touch points to get he or she interested in actually making a move. So if we can just start the conversation off on a good foot instead of just a hard sell on come work for us, we're hiring, I think that's a good way to start the relationship there.
Yeah, I just see Zoom, since everybody's on Zoom now, the ability to get your top talent internally or your senior executives to actually participate, getting them to go off site, unless it's maybe to their alumni or event or what have you, is kind of a tough ordeal. It's a lot easier to get them participate in a Zoom call. And with the email marketing, you can do more direct targeting, not just everybody shows up if you want to. So kind of tailoring it. I see an interesting world in 2021 when it comes to how recruiting groups utilize Zoom and Zoom events to target that talent recruitment. Anybody else to add to Brent's comments? It's kind of, to me, it's like Glenn and Brent, and probably Malia and Glenn and Brent are like in two different worlds, right? The smaller size focus versus a huge company and everything that comes along with that, both good and bad when it comes to recruiting. All right, Malia, let's jump over to you.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. So my name is Malia. I work for Nortal, the US division. We're actually a global consulting firm, and I lead a small team that focuses on hiring in the United States. Our teams are mostly made up of technical people, software engineers, architects, technical project managers, things like that. So we're still fairly small and really largely unknown in the United States, but we've been around for 20 years, and there's definitely a larger presence in Europe. And so there's a lot more people that know about us over there, and they do a lot of events over there. And so we're still building traction. We're a newly acquired division of Nortel. So we have a huge uphill climb with the employer branding side. And so I definitely echo the sentiment of what Glenn was saying earlier about getting your name out there. It's really, it's challenging. I was going to talk about one thing, but I think I'm going to deviate just for a second, because we were talking about marketing, employer branding, and somebody asked the question of what tactics does your internal marketing team use to build talent brand and get direct results? And I think that this is really in line with how to hire and kind of using unique and creative ways. So we've done some really cool things during COVID. I had been watching a lot of webinars, and I came up with this idea of creating a raw video of our people demonstrating our culture. And so the marketing team helped put this together. We came up with a list of questions, and we want them centered around our values that we have for a company. And so we asked a bunch of different people to record themselves answering the question and telling a little bit about why they like working for the company. And so they just did it with their cell phone, and then our marketing team compiled it all together with some music and also a few other slides. And it's great. So we push that out on social media, but we can also embed that in our campaigns that go out to candidates. So we build pipelines for the types of roles that we hire all the time. And we send out marketing campaigns to these people, even if we don't have a role open, because consulting can be very unpredictable. We don't really know all the time of, how many roles we're going to hire in the next month or the next quarter. It's very sporadic, big hills and valleys. And so we're constantly nurturing these pipelines. And so using things like a video to showcase our culture is really a good tool, because what we have is something that might be a little bit unique to other companies. So that was something that we did over the summer, and that was really successful, and we're using that video all the time. They've also done spotlights on employees, and we actually tell them hey, we're going to be hiring a bunch of technical project managers. Can you do a spotlight on a project manager? And then we do some social campaigns around that. And we can also embed that in our letters reaching out to candidates as well, so that they can meet someone kind of virtually of doing the same job that they are doing. We also, what else have we done? Before COVID, we were heavily involved in the Hacker X events. I don't know if you guys have done those before, but they're really great for companies that don't have a brand name. And so I would pay the extra money to have 5 minutes at the microphone to get up and talk to the whole audience about what we did and really drum up some excitement. And our booth was always one of the most popular ones, because we were the ones that took the time to do a talking piece about our culture and what made us unique. And if you just focus on those bits and pieces that really resonate with your audience, they like got really excited. And for us, it was things like we don't do any maintenance work and we don't have to be on call. And for developers, those two things are huge. And so in Seattle, there's a lot of, just like San Francisco, there's a lot of like war over the software engineers. It's a huge battle to get these people because there's a lot of openings still, even through COVID, and always not as many engineers as you would hope looking. So you got to make yourself stand out. So those are some things that we've done. And then going back to our talent pipelines, we are constantly building new ones as we enter new states. So right now we're kind of branching out because we're hiring more remote people. So we're trying to figure out different talent pipelines and what works in different regions and how to reach out to those folks. But we find that reaching out with these like drip campaigns is with links really is very helpful.
Molly, a question for you around your pipelining and your ongoing engagement and messaging. Do you let anybody join your pipeline, or you kind of vet who you put in those pipelines to people that you really think, hey, there's a match here if we can find the right position, the right timing, or is it anybody who wants to sign up can be part of it?
Well, we have an open like talent community job opening where people can apply, and we cultivate that as well. But the ones that are in our talent pipelines are people that we feel like that either we're getting their profiles off LinkedIn or they're people that have applied and we've talked to in the past. We feel like they're a match for that type of role. And it may start off really broad, like we may pull a lot of people into that pipeline at the very beginning, but as we're nurturing it and talking to people, those people may pop out as like not a good fit, or, you know, maybe down the road, you know, they might be too junior or too senior for what we're looking for. But we do also tag people as like a short list for the people that are active or that we've interviewed recently that we want to consider for the next opening. So that way, if we get another job opening, we can quickly go to those like top 5 people and immediately get them into the interview process.
I've been on both sides of the stick where you do the red velvet rope and only certain people get behind that. You have less numbers, but they're just higher quality, right? And that when a quick way to make recruiters mad at you is to market the positions to unqualified people who go and apply and then they have to go through it. You will quickly lose their faith in you. Learned that lesson a few years back, where more isn't always is better. And then your pipelines, are you defining that by role and location, or how are you defining the pipelines to re-engage people on?
Well, we have different, software engineer is our main bread and butter role. And we have 4 different levels of those roles. And so we have a pipeline for each role. More of those, mostly those people are to Washington State, but we also right now have pipelines for similar levels in other states. Or just the rest of the country as we are kind of building our database around these different pipelines. But we try to segregate them out as to where we feel like they might fit level-wise so that we're not reaching out to a junior person for a senior role and vice versa. So
for the rest of the panelists, are you incorporating the pipelining outreach concept at your companies?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we have certain segments where we know is going to be hot skill sets, so to speak, and have those periodic checkpoints scheduled already. We sometimes do automated outreach for events that we have coming out within those talent communities, but you know, each recruiter has kind of their own bread and butter, so to speak, of folks they want to keep in touch with and make sure that we cultivate that community as time goes forward.
I keep asking about location and management level because in the past, most ATSs, when they allow you to, hey, sign up to get our job alerts, it's a very top level, and it's just comes back as non-specific content to people. Meaning, if I'm in recruiting, why am I getting an HR generalist job sent to me? I needed to go down to the recruiting level. So I always tell people when you're doing your pipelines, do job level or just role in 2 levels, like HR, recruiting. So you get 2 roles. And then location, and then management level. If you put people in those appropriate pipelines and then you message those appropriate pipelines, you get that direct targeted content back. You don't see it too often, but whenever it's just this great big bucket, you don't see people responding back to it, in my experience.
I just want to make a comment on the pipeline. So I go one step further. If we're looking for, I'm just saying, senior .NET developer or something. So if there's other roles out there, I'll reach out to my pipeline, even if the role is not specifically in their niche expertise. And the reason for that is they see that we're hiring, right? And I think that's important. Plus, you never know who knows who. If you're a project manager, it doesn't mean you don't know any developers. Of course you do. You know what I mean? So I keep them engaged in communicating, and they realize these are people that I have in my network, and they realize that every email I send or every time I reach out to them, it's not going to be specifically for them. But I've only had maybe a handful of people in the last 20 years tell me, don't send me any more emails, So they keep it around. It's funny, it's funny how people come back 9 months later and respond to that email I sent them. Hey, I'm on the market looking, So, it's funny.
It helps when you're a direct connect for something they need. All right, Mahan, let's jump over to you.
Sure. So thanks for having me. Really quickly, I've spent my entire career in financial services. Most recently, I was the director of recruiting at American Century, which is call it a mid-sized asset management firm with about $175 billion in assets under management and about 1,600 employees worldwide. Before that, I was at BlackRock in their global executive search team, where I covered senior level hiring across all businesses, all functions. And prior to that, I had about a 7-8 year career in executive search with Spencer Stuart, Aegon Zender, and Caldwell Partners. And I started my early career as a trader before transitioning into the world of recruiting. I was with Deutsche Bank for about 8 years. Covering everything except the US. So I spent my entire time in financial services and really engaging candidates. It's a bit different, I found. I think when you're reaching out to candidates in sort of the financial services space, whether it's banking, capital markets, or just even the asset management space, I think it's really important to be quick, to be fairly direct, concise, and also it's very relationship driven, I found. From a client perspective, a lot of what I've gotten was, who are your top 10 portfolio managers in sort of the small cap active space, or who are the top 10, technology bankers that we would want to look at, So when you talk about pipelining, it's more about product and it's more about the skills as opposed to where they're located, because most of the times the clients I've worked with have been global firms, so they can put people anywhere. One of the big things that was mentioned by the three other panelists today was branding and sort of marketing. I found that probably the best way to do it, at least in the space I've operated, are one of two ways. I think an indirect approach where you're talking to candidates as a bit more of a source or a subject matter expert. I think when you, most of the time when you're approaching, especially from a corporate recruiter perspective, they're going to have a bias, whether it's positive or negative. If it's BlackRock, where I used to work, a lot of times it was very positive because of its positioning in the financial services field. American Century was a little bit different. It's an emerging company. It's a bit more narrow, and so it could go either way. A lot of times people just didn't know about the firm, and so you had to, it was an opportunity to educate. I think when you go with an indirect approach, you're soliciting advice. I think it's a great way to disarm candidates and sort of move away from that binary response, yes, no, right? Then the other way is just kind of leading with a potential item of interest, right? It's if your firm puts out an interesting article or a white paper, which, your chief economist could do that, or one of the research analysts could put some collateral out. Sometimes it's a company reaction to a major market event or a trend, a key hire. I try not to go with key losses, although sometimes that can be an opportunity. We sort of say, well, if, as you can see, so-and-so left and we have an opening, I'd love to talk to you about that, or your ideas about who can fill that position. And then finally, just events. A lot of times firms, the firms I've worked at will do events. We try to get more of the of the people from the business and less of the recruiters, because it feels less like HR is flooding flooding the room. But I've always found that the events also work really well to get people involved in networking. I think it's about building a rapport with a specific individual, certainly presenting yourself to the market and your client as a trusted advisor, and being able to get insight into the market. So I think certainly with the creativity, it's again, it just goes back to the relationship and building it for me.
So, a question for you, Mahan, and kind of to everybody in the panel, kind of incorporating some things we've been saying about engineers wanting from engineers, finance wants to hear from finance, and kind of pulling in not just recruiting for a rec, but building that brand. Have we ever done it where, and kind of getting back to the original topic, an attention getting way to recruit, right? Bring it all the way back to, I need you to open this email because we haven't spoken before. And in this email, I want to move in the next steps, but getting to that open point. I've only done this a couple of times where your confidence had to be high, but it would say the role, like the VP of engineering at Acme wants to talk to you, right? That's the subject line to get that attention in there. Has anybody ever done anything where you're making that direct connect, you're involving the business line, i.e. specific people in that initial outreach to somebody where you're being bold? I would call it bold.
It's getting the hiring manager. Usually it's a very specific person that they want to talk to. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, that person has to be well known in the space, and you do have to do a little bit of selling. I've done that before. You have to be selective about it. I think that you do run a little bit of risk that the person might not want to talk to that individual for whatever reason. It's worked. Sometimes it's worked. Sometimes it hasn't. Yeah. Candidly, you have to be selective in my mind. But I think it's really, when you can get the business engaged with that, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, the few times that I've seen that, you did have that VP's position or permission ahead of time to do that outreach.
Or they might ask you.
True. But let me ask you something you just said around that person may not be well known. And I think that's true in just about all industries professionals. You know the company, you know what a VP of engineering that company does, but you don't know a person, right? It's not like you're an actor or anything like that. I used to work in the computer gaming, and it was a little bit different because on the back of every game, you could see who the software engineers were. So it was a little bit like an actor in the way of making a movie. What do you do when you want to market people at your company, but truth of the matter is, it's not like they have recognition like an actor in the movie industry would have, or a director in the movie industry would have? Are there ways to kind of promote that? Is it just title and company, or what are your thoughts around that? And this goes for everybody.
Oh, I think it can be the title.
Yeah. Quite honestly,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, the title is one thing. I think it's a learning opportunity, quite frankly. I mean, we talk about data and facts, right? If we reach out to 10 people and 8 of them don't respond and 2 people say, well, I don't know who that is, then that's data and facts that we can go back to the manager and let him or her know, hey, reputation matters. And if they're fighting you on certain outreach initiatives, or they don't feel it's important to build your brand, I think this is more of a partnership opportunity. Instead of just an order taker, you're kind of stepping into the whole talent advisor role and saying, hey, this is important moving forward. Maybe it wasn't 10 to 15 years ago, but your reputation, your brand, and what you're known for, good and or bad, is important with attracting passive talent there.
Yeah, but Glenn, I don't know if you can say something there, Glenn.
Yeah, I had him. I'm sorry, I was on mute. So one of the things I do is kind of promote, like, say, if it's one of our subject matter expert practice directors, I'll promote them, kind of what they've accomplished in their career, what they've done, and try to sell them, actually, almost, right? Because they're going to be the person they're going to be reporting to. So I've done that in the past. And actually, there's times too where we felt that it was probably better for either that person to directly reach out or a CEO to directly reach out to the candidate, because I'm a recruiter. Okay, I'm not downplaying my value, but if the message comes from that senior level person directly in our company, sometimes it just adds more value that they're really reaching out to me directly, so they must be interested in me, and wanting to speak with me. So there's nothing wrong with that either. I mean, it's just a matter of, the best way to attract that person to the company, so.
Yeah,
Or Sean, you could even say you're reaching out on behalf of that individual, whether it's a CEO, whether it's the head of a business. And a lot of times I've just said, look, I want to facilitate a discussion. They're really interested in speaking to you,
Yep.
just having a conversation, right? It's a great selling point from there because it's not a recruiter reaching out. You're just doing somebody else a favor who's busy.
yeah, I like the way you frame it as a conversation versus, hey, do you want to apply to this job that we have right now? Right? It's a total different animal. One thing that I've done in the past, and this is sort of pre-COVID, it doesn't really apply for the foreseeable future, is, and this is what I was asking about the red velvet rope, it's like dividing people. There's leads, people we don't know, contacts or candidates, people we do know, and then the red velvet rope where, hey, we're really a match. I just got to do what I need to do to get that person hired when I can. But that conversion from lead to contact, people we don't know to people we do know, events was the easiest way to make that conversion. And as really as, hey, we're going to have this speaker at this event. Are you going? And kind of leave it at that, because the vast majority, we did this a lot for software engineers. The vast majority of people aren't going to a conference. But if you kind of frame it that, if you can't make it there, hey, let's stay in touch in this way or something like that. Okay, great. Now they would convert, and now they're in your database, and now you can see, okay, they're at one of our target companies, they have our target skill sets, they move over to that red velvet rope area. But that whole, not a rec, not trying to get you to apply because you may not be interested right now, but here's an industry event, everybody's open to hearing about it. I worked at one place where they hosted a martini bar at a big developer conference. That was the biggest success we ever had. People were jumping to get into that, free vodka. But using that event method, and Mahan, like your point, well, it's not a rec, it's not applying to a job, it's a conversation. I think if we look at ways to attract candidates, not just ask if they want to apply to a job, but to something else, something more beneficial to them. But has anybody ever done anything around not marketing careers or immediate hiring needs, but just connections with their candidate?
We've had, well, when we were hiring mostly local candidates, we would have coffee with some of the ones that we really wanted to hire, some that really, like, we'd been cultivating them and reaching out, and they would actually respond to, like, sure, I'm open to grabbing a cup of coffee. So we'd meet with those folks, and ultimately I would say our success rate was over 90% of hiring those folks eventually, because they met with you in person, they developed a personal connection, they stayed in touch, and then ultimately when you had the right opening for them, they responded. But that's not a great strategy for, candidates not in your market, or even right now. You could have a virtual cup of coffee though.
I knew a recruiter once, he's the only person I ever saw do this. He took that coffee approach, and he would send them a Starbucks gift card and say, you can use this when we have a coffee together to talk about your career. Because his perception was, well, most people aren't going to meet you for coffee, but if you send them a gift card, they're going to respond, right? So he's trying to increase his response rate, not necessarily his coffee date rates. Work like a charm. He had to pay for it, right? It was either did $5 or $10 coupons, and he would do it for targeted talent, but it worked for him because he would get that response rate back, and it only cost him $5 or $10 for a new connection or what have you. All right, we've gone over a bit. Thank you very much. I appreciate the good conversation. Do we have any? Oh, I do have one thing I want to ask everybody. So we talk about marketing and outreach and outbound efforts. Has anybody taken this COVID time to relook at their job descriptions and how their job descriptions are wrote as far as connecting with people? Or is it the same?
I think personally, and just to caveat off the COVID situation from the social unrest, so to speak, after the George Floyd killings, and being more, I think, present and understanding what we put out there, whether it's marketing and or job descriptions, is something we need to be focus on and be aware of. So, I mean, we have taken a second look at some of our job postings and making sure we have that inclusive mindset out there as far as what we're promoting. Just a couple little words honestly can make a big difference, just depending on who's perceiving or who's reading that job description. So it is something that we have taken a second look at as well.
Doesn't sound like anybody's really redoing their job descriptions, huh?
No, only,
on the
only,
list.
I'm sorry. Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. I was just gonna say it's on the list of things to do.
Yeah, with
We
some
had-
of our
we had-
clients, it's kind of up in the air, right? So some clients say, oh, it's a remote position, 100% now until COVID subsides. But then there's a big question mark. What does that mean? You know. So, but there are some clients out there saying now they'll hire people remotely, 100%. You know, even post COVID. So that just opens up another market for us as far as speaking with how we're reaching out to candidates from a job perspective. So, but it's a big question mark though in general. Long term, a lot of clients are saying, "Oh, we're just going to have the important people or the necessary people come back to the office, even when it subsides and all that." So it's just a big question mark right now.
I think employment, Brian, when most of your workforce is working remotely, is going to be sort of an interesting effort to go through. It's a different world. So how do you promote? Hey, we have free coffee and snacks when you're at home every day. So, well, and any final thoughts or comments to the topic as a whole?
I think personally, my big thing is it's trial and error. All right. Sometimes you throw out events or ideas there. It's just not going to work. That's okay. Just write it off. I mean, if you haven't failed, you haven't tried hard enough is what I tell a lot of our team members. So don't be afraid to fail. It's not a big deal. If it doesn't work, just move on to the next idea.
The one thing I wanted to mention real quick was we actually sponsored a couple of these user group events. And all that meant was, like, for instance, we sponsored one in December. It was a holiday event for a senior networking group in the Philadelphia area. And all that really meant was we paid for the food, which was a couple $100s, and we got a 15-minute chance to speak about our company in front of everybody. So that's a pretty inexpensive marketing campaign way of spending money. Yeah. So.
Malia, Mahan, anything? All good?
Nope, I agree with Brent that it's trial and error. I mean, we're always trying new things and coming up with new ideas, and you just got to try them, see what works, and if it doesn't, you just move on to the next idea. So it's really what it's all about.
Track your conversion rates, see what works and what doesn't. You're not going to get 50% conversion. So,
Absolutely.
All right. Wait, thank you everybody very much. I really appreciate it. Sort of an interesting topic in today's day and age and where I think we're going to in 2021. It'll certainly be interesting. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.